So without further ado, second talk. Who here is doing GraphQL in production? Quite a fair amount of people. Who has issues with nullability? Everyone? Not everyone? So if you have issue, I hope I will present you solutions. If you don't, you will have issue after this talk. I like to start things with a small poll. Here on the left, you have a simple GraphQL type. It's a video type with a single field of string type. And the question is, what can you expect in title? Is it answer A, you will always have a string, B, a string or maybe null, C, a string or maybe an error, and D, maybe all of that. Who says A? One. B? Bunch of folks says B, C, and D. Yeah, quite a fair amount of people for D. Other solution, or maybe some people don't know? Everybody knows, that's perfect. So I'm not going to tell you the answer right now because I want you to pay attention to the slides. The answer will come in 10 minutes. And instead, I will talk about myself now. I'm Martin. I'm working at Apollo. I do a lot of Android stuff. I started in GraphQL by doing mobile apps. I also help organizing the Paris Android Meetup. So if you come to Paris, come say hi. Do a bit of Gradle. And these days, I spend all my days in this repo here, which is Apollo Kotlin, which is a type-safe client for Kotlin. So like 95% is Android, but you can also use it on iOS and web and a bunch of other things. Oh, sorry. Before doing that, back in the day, a long time ago, I used to work at a company called Dailymotion. That is a French YouTube. It used to be a thing, not so much nowadays, but back in 2016, it had a typical architecture of a big, huge PHP monolith. And on the mobile app, we had Java, so a huge Java code base. I don't know, it feels like it was fairly typical by that time. And in 2017, the team at Dailymotion had the good idea to try GraphQL. It was 2 years since GraphQL was first open sourced, and it was really the hot thing. And they were like, we have this huge PHP monolith. We are going to chop it down in microservices in Python and JavaScript and a bunch of other stuff and expose a nice, clean GraphQL API. And for me here, but also for my colleague on iOS and web, it was a very good news because it meant we had a single endpoint. We didn't have to wait for the backend engineers to introduce new fields, like it's removing a lot of friction. 2017, hello, was also a great year because it's the year Google introduced Kotlin for Android apps. So this was the announcement at Google I/O, and every Android developer was like, this is the best day of my life because Kotlin solves the billion-dollar mistake. In Java, you have nullable references. In Kotlin, you don't because you have nullability in the type system. So really, 2017 was the pinnacle of my professional life. Like, I had a nice type system for my API. I had a nice type-safe language with nullability for my apps. I was happy. Almost. If you look closely at the type system, there is one weird thing, which is in Kotlin, a non-null string is just a string, plain string. But in GraphQL, the same thing, it's nullable. So back then, it got me really, really puzzled. Why is that? But then I went on with my life, and I was like, I'm a seasoned senior Android developer. This is just a syntax issue. I can deal with it. So I did. I did write my first query here. I got my video, a bunch of fields, title, description, view counts, comment. Well, pretty standard stuff for a video service, right? And here, what you have here is Jetpack Compose, which is the React of Android. Sorry. Actually made by the same people that made React. Leland Richardson used to work on React and then contributed Jetpack Compose at Google. You don't need to understand everything. Just know that you can do code generation and you will have type-safe models. Except that when you try to use them, you see these red underlines. This is not good. The IDE is screaming at me because for some reason, the code-generated field here is nullable. And if I want to display a text, I don't want it to be nullable. I want something to be displayed. So I went back to the schema. I look at title, and in the schema, title is nullable. Description is nullable as well. View count is also nullable, and every field in my schema is nullable. So 2017 was a bit less good at the time. I think I went to my backend engineers. I went to their office and I was like, hey guys, I don't know exactly the word I used, but it was something like, what the hell are you doing? If everything is nullable, why do we even have a type system? Why do we have nullability? And to be honest, I don't think they really had a good answer. I mean, or at least they didn't convince me. And I just went on with my life of like doing whatever I can. I think, yeah, the argument was just they were using Python, I think, on the backend at the time. Python didn't have a lot of nullability handling. And so everyone also was doing nullable types by default, and they were just doing like everyone else. So I just gave up the discussion because I didn't want to get mad with my backend engineers. And I did something like this, where you see a double bang here. This is not good, usually. But because I'm a seasoned Android engineer, I did things a little bit better. And I actually checked that there were errors before displaying the text. But since my text needed something that is non-null, this double bang here in Kotlin, it's force unwrap. It means if it's null, force unwrap it. But if it's really null, it's going to crash at runtime, which is not good. And actually happened. So I did that, and it was working well, actually. It was working well for a couple of months. Except I got greeted 2 months later with this nice Jira ticket. And what happened is that we introduced a new feature, which is video upload. And while before that, every video always had a title, with video upload, it was not the case anymore. You could just upload a video and fill in the metadata afterward. But just looking at the schema, you wouldn't be able to tell that now you could have null in the title, because before that, it was never non-null. So yeah, this broke. So I went back to my code and did something like this, where I first check for errors, and then I check if the title is null. If the title is null, I display a placeholder, and if it's not null, I actually display the good title with a double bang, which is missing here. And this, I handle my errors however I can. So the first way of handling my errors is crashing, which is not really good. I can display a generic error and coalesce errors to null, or like just have a good fallback. And this is all. I didn't enjoy that part too much. Like I just wanted to write UIs, and dealing with errors takes a lot of time, especially like if you have a lot of partial data, like this was just for one field. But if you have a view count and if you have a description, you have to check in your UI code, you have to do 10 checks, and you have to discuss with your designer how to display everything. And if you have a lot of fields, you have different combinations. You have to think about all these different UIs and layouts, and it's a massive pain. So I started really, so this was, I think, a lot later, like maybe 2020 when I actually joined Apollo. Started to think, why do we have this situation? And I actually found the actual really a good answer to why everything is nullable by default, which I'm going to read because it's important. It's in the GraphQL best practice. You can go to graphql.org and you will see that text. It says, most type systems which recognize null provide both the common type and the nullable version of that type. whereby default type do not include null unless explicitly declared. Okay, so that's a lot of word to say this is the standard for Kotlin and TypeScript. By default, it's non-null. However, in a GraphQL type system, every field is nullable by default. So this is where everything, all the pain is coming from. This is this sentence here. This is because there are many things that can go awry in a network service backed by databases and other services. So we live in a distributed world. Everything can go wrong. You have your microservice in Python or Go or whatever, and you aggregate all of that in GraphQL. If a field becomes an error, you want to have a partial result. You don't want to blow up your whole response, and you represent that error as a null, and so you want everything to be nullable. So if you have an error, this is like this. If you have an error on title, for example, you have a null title, and you have an error next to the data that says, at this pass, you have an error. But it's null. And there is this nice property of GraphQL called error propagation that says, if you have an error on a field that is non-null, then it's going to blow up. It's going to propagate to the parent field, and the whole video will be null. And so you lose some data, which is not great. So I'm back to my initial poll, and the answer is actually, I don't know. Like, if I look at this, no, really. And even A actually is a possible answer. Initially, I didn't include A, but in some people's schemas, you may never have an error or a null. They just put everything nullable for future evolution. So they just keep the opportunity to return null one day. But it's really hard for myself and other front-end developers because we have to guess. Every time you see something is nullable in a schema, is it really null? Is it null for error reasons? Well, we don't know. So that is the pain. Now, what do we do? Are there any questions, by the way? We can make this interactive. Yes?
I don't know if it's a question or a remark. Why doesn't the backend handle this? Because now we have all these front ends, iOS, web, Android, whatever, have to handle all these errors. And if the backend handle that error, oh, this is nil. We return an error instead of an empty field. Is it so non-obvious, or is it so common to return false values from the backend? I'm a front-end developer, by the way, so. It sounds like if a field is nil, it should just return an error saying, hey, I couldn't fill this field because the database is down.
So the base reason is you don't have errors in JSON?
Well, you can have an error object returned. That's quite common.
Not really, because GraphQL allows custom scalars. So custom scalars are a way to augment the GraphQL type system. And you can say, and you can represent it as any JSON value. So if we were to encode a special object as an error, it will clash with custom scalar. You could never return an error in a custom scalar position. And so this is, at the core of it, it's really a JSON encoding issue. Like if GraphQL were over protobuf, for an example, we wouldn't have this issue. And it's also because when GraphQL was designed, it was 2012 at Facebook. I should have led with that, actually. And TypeScript was nowhere where it is right now. And everything was a lot more nullable. So it's all the pain from 10 years ago, or maybe more now. Yeah?
Do you agree with their explanation of why things should be nullable by default? Because honestly, from your explanation, it seems more like things can go wrong and we don't really care, right?
So I agree with the principle that everything can go wrong. Like, I think GraphQL is used in a lot of distributed environments. And if you have a huge cloud, probably multi-providers or something like this, it may happen. I mean, things go wrong. And if you have a huge query, a typical case of GraphQL is you avoid waterfalls. So you have a main page, and in that page, you have maybe product information, comment, reviews. And if the reviews microservice goes down, you don't want your product description to go down as well. So I think this makes a lot of sense. But blowing up everything just because you have an error, and what I don't agree with is that we should represent this with null fields. And that's the main thing. And this is the thing we have been trying to fix collectively in the GraphQL nullability working group, which I'm going to talk about right now. Yeah?
Sorry, in the declaration place, you had title null and the path of the title being part of the error. Yes, here. Is it always the case when the title is null, we put it in the error part, or is it sometimes we have a nullable field and it might not be in the error?
This is exactly my point. Thank you for the question. You don't know. Sometimes it's null, sometimes it's not, and sometimes it's nullable for error reasons, but it's coalesced, and there's no reason for that. I'll move on to the solutions, because it's been a pain for a lot of people, and especially the folks at Yelp, the iOS team at Yelp, recognized this quite early in 2021. And yeah, it's time flies, time flies. And they introduced this concept called client control nullability, which is I don't want to handle an error or a null here. I put a bang in my query, and the server is going to make sure this field is never null. And I'm going to also have an error boundary that says, hey, I'm ready to handle an error, a global errors for the video. And so this can be null. And it went on for 2 years. We had a lot of discussions until we had this nice eureka moment, which is it cannot really live on the client because the client doesn't know the shape of the data, like the schema belongs to the server. And this doesn't tell what the question was earlier, like if it's null for errors or if it's null for like just product reasons, like this is absent. So the other step in this long journey, that is all happening publicly, by the way. If you want to see the video, a lot of people arguing about nullability, they are all on the GraphQL YouTube. And in 2023, we realized that maybe GraphQL was just missing types because in TypeScript, you can represent all of this. In GraphQL, well, we have only 2 types. And so this led to a lot of proposals, like Asterix, which is we just introduce a new type, which is semantically never null. So it can never be null. It can be a string. It can be an error, but never null. And we have the directive solution. If you've been doing GraphQL, you might be used to this solution of slapping directives everywhere, like it's convenient. Where we just annotate the type instead of changing the syntax. We had a directive, and we introduce a new type like this. So that was 2 years ago now. 2025, woohoo! We had another eureka moment, which is actually errors, like we said before, they will always be there. So maybe it's not worth encoding them in the type system, and maybe we should do like Java does, or like a lot of other system does. Actually, not Java, because I have checked exceptions. But Kotlin is better than Java, where you can have exceptions thrown everywhere, and GraphQL errors would be a bit the same. Every field can throw an exception. So just remove the error from the equation, and we are back to a nice, clean type system with just 2 types, the nullable one and the non-nullable one. And then, once we have that, and we have a field that is semantically non-null, so the product will never make it null, we can add bang in our schema, and that's it. And the syntax is not the same, but at least the client developer can make a good assumption about it. The main problem with this is how we deal with Facebook schemas that have apps deployed everywhere, where they cannot really change this. Oh, yeah, I'm going too fast, sorry. There's one thing with this. You remember I talked about error propagation before, how this is removing information. If you have an error on views today, the server is going to remove all the data of video, so you will lose video title, video description. This is called error propagation. So if we want to actually model these two types, we have to get rid of error propagation because we still want partial data because we live in a distributed world where everything can fail and we want partial data. So we need that. So what we did is introducing a new directive, again, yet a directive, called disable error propagation that you can put on all your queries, and that's going to do exactly that. It's very small, it's very self-contained, it's a very little change to the specification, so I'm hoping it can get accepted. And as I was saying before, the only problem is like big schemas like Facebook, where they cannot really change the behavior like this because they have clients deployed everywhere. And for them, we would keep using those, what we call transitional types, by using, well, directive or maybe a new syntax, but it's probably looking more like a directive because this is going to be transitional, right? So we don't want this to stay in the language forever. Current status, so you see it's been over 5 years. It's evolving slow, but I think we're seeing the end of the tunnel. Disable error propagation has been merged in GraphQL JS, and it's going to be in GraphQL JS 17. It's also in GraphQL Java, so 2 of the largest implementations have it. So you can go now and disable these all things from 15 years ago. And a lot of tools now support the transitional type with semantic non-null, Apollo Kotlin, Relay, Hot Chocolate, Graz. If you know other, please let me know, and I will add them. And what gets me really excited is we have a release of the spec coming up. The initial plan is July. I don't know if it will make it. It's still on track. It's still on track. And I'm hoping we can get that in, and with that, it unlocks a lot of use cases. Last slide. What will make sure that it will get merged, how we can make this move faster, is getting more feedback. So these are a few things that are currently under discussion. One about the directive, whether it should be a directive or a request parameter. This is the main entry point for everything that I talked about, and all the solutions that I didn't talk about. I talked about 3 or 4, but there were like maybe 10 or 15. And the GraphQL nullability working group, that means every month. So if you have a use case, if you have an issue, if you want to try the new experimental stuff, or if you just want to discuss over Zoom Wednesday afternoon, please come say hi. And with that, I want to say thank you. And I don't know if we have time for questions. Yeah?
We do have time.
Okay.